In the dimly lit corridors of military encampments, whispers of rebellion grow louder. Chaos stirs within the ranks of what was once regarded as a formidable military force. The historic echoes of Russian turmoil resonate eerily as we investigate a shocking metamorphosis within Putin's army. A staggering reality unfolds before us: an army built on discipline is rapidly disintegrating into chaos, with soldiers abandoning their positions at an alarming rate, reminiscent of a critical moment from the past. The startling resemblance of the current desertion rate draws parallels to 1917's catastrophic figures in the Tsarist army, where a 14% exodus was pivotal to prompting a revolution. Today, we see armed, frustrated, and undisciplined troops retreating in disarray, potentially unraveling the very fabric of authority within the regime. Military historians have a term for this: a moral collapse. As we examine the poignant similarities to the final days of American involvement in the Vietnam War, it becomes clear that the Russian military faces a crisis far graver than anything witnessed in recent memory. In Vietnam, soldiers grew increasingly disillusioned, refusing to follow orders blindly, yet their desertion rates pale in comparison to the current, industrial-scale evacuations occurring within Russia. The staggering turbulence mirrors desperation brought forth even during the darkest days of World War II, where ideological loyalty held steadfast until the last moment. Today, however, an absence of discipline and reverence is evident, as neither fear nor duty can compel these soldiers to remain at the front. So, what drives tens of thousands to risk everything, defying the wrath of their commanders and braving enemy lines? This striking act of desertion isn't born from cowardice. Instead, it embodies an instinctual fight for survival in unbearable circumstances. Key factors emerge from reports indicating a systemic unraveling: unbearable conditions compounded by relentless harassment, known in military speak as "dead of China," where older soldiers unleash brutality upon newcomers. In these frigid trenches devoid of basic necessities, the philosophy of valiant sacrifice glorified in propaganda crumbles. Soldiers find themselves immersed in an environment rife with abuse, stripped of their dignity. The chaos envelopes their units as the leadership falters, leading to a culture of oppression, where the real enemy resides within their very ranks. This atmosphere breeds a palpable fear, with soldiers increasingly recoiling not from enemy combatants but from their own allies. As we delve further, we uncover a devastating truth: there's a catastrophic shortfall in supplies and abandonment, not a simple oversight. With strategic Ukrainian strikes severing vital fuel and supply lines, troops have gone weeks without sustenance. Medical necessities slip further from reach, while ammunition is rationed sparingly. The image of a soldier confronting starvation starkly contrasts the militaristic ideals espoused by commanding officers. This dire situation finds its roots not just in logistical chaos but within a fundamental collapse of the war economy itself. A soldier out of ammunition today signifies failure at the production lines that once thrived. With sanctions throttling access to critical components, the Russian defense industry flounders. Attempts to source supplies elsewhere, like from nations such as China and North Korea, only scratch the surface of the aging, Soviet-era machinery now falling behind the times. The slow suffocation of resources pushes commanders toward desperate decisions. To counterbalance dwindling firepower, they exploit their last available resource: human lives. Soldiers are forced into what they term myasny sturmy, or meat assaults, sent forth inadequately prepared and poorly equipped to face enemy defenses alone. With minimal support and the specter of death looming, many soldiers refuse these unwinnable missions, which feel less like military engagement and more like execution orders from their own leaders. Beyond the inherent dangers lies a beacon of hope. A Ukrainian initiative known as I Want to Live offers a lifeline to beleaguered Russian soldiers. This multifaceted project assures captives they may surrender and be treated humanely, fostering an unexpected wedge in soldier loyalty. As word spreads through covert channels, soldiers recognizing their perilous options may surrender, revealing cracks in the old foundations of military resolve. Through each layer of turmoil, we witness not just a collapse of authority but a striking transformation fueled by the primal instinct to survive. A cognitive victory unravels Russia's might, exploiting the intrinsic human desire for preservation. The coming days will surely reveal whether this fracture will deepen, hinting at a new tide of hope amid the chaos. Summary of previous part: the dire conditions within the Russian army are not the noble sacrifices portrayed in government propaganda. The systematic abuse among soldiers, especially from veterans to newcomers, creates a brutal environment. Soldiers face horrific living standards in trenches, and the fear of their own comrades is greater than the threat of the enemy. Imagine a battlefield where survival is not just about dodging bullets but also escaping the relentless cruelty of your own unit. The unofficial hierarchy shatters any hope of camaraderie where fear is planted by the very soldiers who should stand beside you. As the chain of command weakens, soldiers wrestle not only with the chaos of war but also with the unpredictable brutality of their superiors. Psychological warfare rages within, breeding distrust and paranoia. In a setting that feels archaic and harsh, the reality becomes suffocating. But conditions aren't just terrible, they are catastrophic. A complete breakdown of supply chains hints at something ominous. This isn't merely a logistical hiccup, this is abandonment. Soldiers endure weeks without fresh provisions, deprived of essential medical care, and left to scavenge for ammunition. Starvation looms closer with each passing day, like a hungry predator watching from the shadows. Meanwhile, the Russian military's once mighty structure disintegrates under pressure from strategic Ukrainian strikes, crippling the lifelines that once fed their bravado. So what causes this overwhelming shortage? This crisis runs deeper than logistics, it digs into the very foundation of the Russian war economy. When a soldier runs low on ammunition, it often signals a failure at the source, long before it reaches the front lines. As factories shut down, hope dims. What will be the breaking point for these soldiers, their last bite of food or the final bullet in their rifles? Now, as desperation mounts, the question echoes, how long can a broken army endure before collapsing entirely inwards, consumed by its own chaos? The clock is ticking, and a storm of anxiety and fear approaches. In the shadow of chaos, a dire crisis unfolds within the Russian army. As morale plummets and the fabric of military discipline unravels, soldiers find themselves trapped between the chaos of their own ranks and the relentless assault of the enemy. What drives a soldier to abandon their post, risking everything, even their own lives? Recent reports reveal that Western sanctions have severely crippled the Russian defense industry, cutting off access to essential components like microchips and advanced machine parts. The once mighty power of Russia's military now rests on the shoulders of a dilapidated economy, desperately attempting to scrounge parts from nations like China and North Korea. But this is insufficient for the outdated machinery from the Soviet era, rendering artillery shell production tragically inadequate. Meanwhile, the production of new tanks and armored vehicles has regressed to merely refurbishing obsolete equipment. Compounding these issues is a breakdown in logistical support. Ukrainian forces have cunningly targeted transportation hubs, sabotaging bridges and oil refineries, which has led to crippling delays for supply lines. It now takes weeks, or even months, for trucks carrying ammunition and fuel to reach the front lines. When production and logistical failures coalesce, commanders are left with a chilling choice. With technology and resources stretched thin, leaders resort to what they perceive as their only option, the lives of the soldiers themselves. Desperately inadequately trained and poorly equipped, battalions are sent in waves to face well-fortified Ukrainian positions. Known among their ranks as meat assaults, these operations are more akin to a death sentence than to tactical warfare. The troops face the horrifying truth: they are expendable pieces on a chessboard of chaos. Refusal to carry out these suicide missions has become increasingly common, as soldiers recognize the dire situation for what it is, an execution order camouflaged as military strategy. The line dividing strategic warfare and sheer brutality has blurred, revealing a desperate scramble for survival. As fear grips not just the rookies but also seasoned fighters, the question lingers: when the battle against the enemy pales in comparison to the horrors of one's own commanders, what choice remains? Will the madness unfold further, pushing more soldiers into the arms of the enemy, or can this chaos be transformed into a cry for freedom? A harsh reality on the front lines of war can often be more deadly than any battle. As the Russian army grapples with unprecedented internal chaos, soldiers are increasingly deserting, driven not just by the cruelty of their commanders, but by a stark lack of resources. How has it come to this? A lifeline exists, however, and it's as simple as 3 words: I want to live. This initiative, launched by Ukrainian intelligence, reaches out to Russian soldiers, offering them a way to surrender safely. With promises of humane treatment in accordance with international conventions, the appeal is resonating. Imagine the fear and desperation swelling in their hearts as they consider a choice that could mean the difference between life and death. The enticing offer disrupts the soldier's dilemma. On one side, there's the grim march toward probable execution by their superiors; on the other, the opportunity to surrender and escape the chaos. Reports confirm that some soldiers attempting to defect contact the Ukrainian side, drawn by the hope of survival. This divide reveals a pivotal shift in the battlefield's psychology. Analysts note that the rates of desertion have transformed drastically. In the earlier years, most runaways were inexperienced recruits fleeing from training camps. Fast forward to 2025, and we discover that seasoned soldiers, battle-hardened yet disillusioned, are now abandoning their posts. What drives this drastic change? The catastrophic shortages in necessary supplies are a stark reality. Food and medical equipment have become scarce, leaving soldiers in dire situations without basic necessities, further exacerbated by deteriorating morale. These brave souls, once loyal servants of the state, now live in fear of both the enemy and their own commanders. The guilt of deserting is overshadowed by the instinct to survive, where the sounds of conflict become a backdrop to their flight for dignity in life. Will they heed the call for survival, or will intimidation hold them captive? As the Russian military faces collapse, the choice to live resonates stronger than ever. In this war, every soldier must decide, do they follow orders to death, or reach for the hope that lies on the other side? Amid rising chaos, a tidal wave of panic sweeps through the ranks of the Russian army. What once resembled a formidable fighting force is now crumbling from within. Recent reports unveil an alarming truth: soldiers are fleeing their posts in record numbers, a staggering 70,000 expected to abandon the fight by year-end, a figure representing nearly 10% of the entire deployed force. This exodus isn't a mere breakdown, it's an implosion of a once mighty system, reflecting deep-seated unrest and despair. By October 2025, the alarming statistics reveal that over 25,000 soldiers abandoned their posts in just 9 months from a single military district. These figures echo a momentous period in history, reminiscent of the 1917 desertions that precipitated the fall of the Tsarist regime. It's a potent reminder that the pillars holding this army together are crumbling. The fear gripping these men is palpable. Many now view their superiors, not the enemy, as the true threat to their survival. What could propel tens of thousands of soldiers to abandon their posts? The answer lies in the unbearable circumstances they face. The systematic abuse and harassment within the ranks erode any semblance of loyalty. The so-called debt of China, an unofficial hierarchy within the army, reveals a culture where veteran soldiers inflict torment on their newer comrades. As conditions both on and off the battlefield deteriorate, these young men find themselves in a gruesome struggle for survival. Picture this: soldiers, barely scraping by, survive without proper food, supplies, or even basic medical care. Days stretch into weeks as they face hunger and deprivation. With the supply chains shattered by relentless assaults from Ukrainian forces, desperation deepens. Food runs out. Ammunition dwindles. Questions linger: how long can they endure before they choose to flee? What awaits those who remain? Today, soldiers are not merely fleeing the front lines, they are running for their lives from the very units meant to protect them. Reports highlight that many desertions now occur directly from battle zones or military hospitals, where the injured face inevitable reintegration into the carnage awaiting them. This is not cowardice but an instinct for survival in a war that has become chaos. Imagine a wounded soldier scaling a hospital window under the cover of night, desperate for any chance at life outside a war he never signed up for. As this crisis unfolds, the Kremlin faces an existential dilemma: how to stem this monumental tide of desertion. The option of general mobilization looms ominously on the horizon, a dangerous gamble that could backfire, plunging the country deeper into turmoil. With each passing day, the essence of the army morphs, shifting from a symbol of might to a haunting echo of lost loyalty. Is the Russian military on the brink of collapse? The answer hangs heavily in the air, rife with uncertainty and foreboding. How will this story unfold? One thing is certain: the stakes have never been higher, and the outcome remains hauntingly unpredictable. In a chilling twist of fate, the mighty Russian military faces a severe self-inflicted wound. Recent reports reveal an alarming internal disintegration that has left the ranks in a state of chaos, as panic ripples through its soldiers. Some might have expected a robust defense, but what unfolds is a grim reality where the fear of one's own superiors looms larger than the frontline enemy. Over a relentless 9 months, an astonishing 25,000 soldiers abandoned their posts in just one military district. This isn't merely a trickle of defections, it outlines the anatomy of a full-blown crisis. The once feared Russian army, once heralded as the second largest force in the world, finds itself crumbling under the weight of its failures, with soldiers fleeing as they grasp their weapons and run. What catalyzes this mass exodus? Analysts draw distressing parallels to the past, pointing to the 1917 collapse of the Tsarist army. With the desertion rate nearing 10%, analysts see echoes of a critical point in history when chaos upended an entire regime. The soldiers, once deemed as the backbone of a powerful military machine, are now ensnared in despair, giving rise to a moral collapse, resulting in their frantic flight from combat. The factors fueling this near-catastrophic retreat are complex and multifaceted. Many soldiers navigate not just the sharp blasts of war but also the brutal hierarchy within their own ranks. The unbearable conditions and relentless harassment they face amplify their struggle. Abandoned to fend for themselves, soldiers grapple with increasingly dire life-or-death decisions in conditions reminiscent of a medieval battlefield. Simultaneously, an acute shortage of supplies strikes a devastating blow to morale. As fuel and essential provisions dwindle, the grim reality is that soldiers have gone weeks without fresh food, medical care, or adequate equipment. Their situation is dire, such shortages threaten to evaporate their will to fight. The military's command structure barely withstands this collapse, resulting in a desperate reliance on hastily organized, reckless offensive maneuvers, where troops are thrown into the line of fire without the necessary support. And yet, just when it seems the situation could not deteriorate further, news trickles in of a controversial new mobilization strategy. The Kremlin, feeling the acute sting of manpower shortages, is now targeting the entire pool of young men aged 18 to 30, those least likely to share the will to fight. The regime dreads inciting the chaos seen in previous mobilizations, where educated young men fled to safer shores, leaving the country exposed. In a move that betrays a lack of trust in its own citizens, the Kremlin has enacted a drastic law, effectively locking down the fate of potential draftees. This is not merely a call to arms, it's a transformation of Russia into a vast, open-air prison. The implications are profound, sending shivers down the spines of countless families as they come to grips with the regime's desperation, their doors tightly bolted against any hope of escape. The warm breath of freedom has become nothing but a distant whisper as the nets tighten. Through relentless upheaval, the soldiers grapple with a crushing burden, a fight for survival on foreign soil, or a fight against their own despair. With the regime's heavy-handed tactics forcing many to the front lines yet again, Russia's future hangs precariously in the balance. What awaits next for its beleaguered soldiers? The answer lies shrouded in uncertainty, with shadows growing longer across the battlefield. In a chilling display of desperation, the Russian regime has resorted to severe measures to prevent its military from disintegrating. This dramatic shift reflects a fundamental breakdown of trust between the leadership and its soldier. The state's recent actions to lock down borders and restrict movement reveal an alarming admission: they fear their own people. As they struggle to retain soldiers who are abandoning their posts, they are also attempting to trap those who have yet to reach the front lines. This is more than just a tactical move, it's a reflection of the crumbling social contract within the country. In an alarming twist, military intelligence reports have highlighted that the Kremlin's hopes to draft more than 130,000 reluctant young recruits into its faltering military infrastructure may backfire dramatically. Reports indicate that in one military district alone, over 25,000 previously engaged soldiers have deserted. This influx of newcomers will face the existing culture of brutality, inadequate supplies, and meat assaults, a term used to describe the wave of poorly supported soldiers sent into battle with little chance of survival. Will these new conscripts choose to endanger their lives in a system already teetering on the brink of collapse? Analysts predict that as many as 15,000 to 20,000 of these individuals might attempt to flee at the first chance they get. This is not a strategy meant to alleviate losses or prevent deserters, it is a panic-driven reaction, intensifying the anger of the youth who are caught in this web of despair. But the roots of this crisis run deeper than mere recent events. The seeds of unrest have been sown over several years. In 2024, military documents disclosed a mere 3,196 desertion cases, numbers the Kremlin downplayed as isolated incidents. Yet, as we moved into 2025, things took a dark turn. In just the first half of that year, desertions exploded to 3,408, surpassing the total of the previous year within mere months. This alarming increase illustrates a system on the verge of collapsing, signaling a deep moral and operational crisis. What could drive a soldier, once loyal and committed, to abandon the very foundation of his comradeship? As we delve deeper into the alarming conditions faced by Russian soldiers, we uncover not just fear, but a peek into an unyielding struggle for survival amidst unbearable circumstances. Can a system marked by panic and despair weather the storm, or is it racing toward an inevitable catastrophic downfall? In 2025, the tipping point for the Russian army came. Reports reveal that between January and July, 3,408 soldiers deserted, surpassing the entire previous year's total in just 6 months. This alarming surge indicates that the desertion rate has essentially doubled. As the year progressed, certain military units, especially those in the most intense conflict areas like Donetsk, reported desertion rates skyrocketing sixfold over a year and tenfold on a monthly basis. This stark reality highlights the unbearable conditions faced at the front. Then came the October report from the GUR. An unthinkable number emerged: over 25,000 soldiers abandoned their posts from a single military region in just 9 months. This figure dwarfs previous records, marking the crisis as a runaway avalanche rather than a mere problem. But it's not merely the loss of personnel that's alarming for the Russian regime. The manner in which these soldiers deserted is creating a ripple effect, sending shockwaves through interior regions of Russia. The GUR documentation indicates that in at least 30 instances, soldiers left their posts armed and equipped. This detail is critical. These aren't just frightened, unarmed soldiers, they are trained, angry individuals with weapons, marching into the heart of Russia, armed with a lingering sense of betrayal. The implications are profound. This shift transforms what was a military discipline issue into a full-blown internal security crisis. The FSB and Rosgvardia, already stretched thin due to Ukraine's ongoing efforts, now find themselves facing the daunting task of pursuing thousands of armed deserters. Imagine the chaos as these veterans, once protectors of the state, now become threats. Their actions may inspire unpredictable and uncontrollable turmoil among the Russian populace. The state's authority, once a source of security, crumbles as citizens witness soldiers morph from defenders into potential aggressors. This moment transforms the military's image in the eyes of ordinary people, setting the stage for unprecedented disorder on the home front. As the panic sets in and the realization sinks deeper, how does a regime manage such a profound betrayal from within its ranks? The answer lies in desperate measures, a relentless crackdown that only breeds further discontent. The real question is, can any authority remain unchallenged as thousands of frightened, armed men wade through chaos toward an uncertain future? In a startling transformation, the once mighty Russian army is now a fragmented shell of its former self, with fear and chaos reigning among its ranks. A recent report reveals that the backbone of Putin's regime is crumbling, marked by an exodus of over 25,000 soldiers from a single military district in just 9 months. This isn't just a matter of desertion, it represents a systemic failure, a total collapse that sends shockwaves through the very heart of military discipline. How did it come to this? Soldiers, driven to despair and panic, are abandoning their posts in droves. By the end of the year, it's projected that around 70,000 soldiers, nearly 10% of the entire army, will have fled. Once touted as the world's second-largest military force, it now resembles a fragmented entity where many are choosing survival over duty. Analysts draw ominous parallels with historical events like the 1917 Bolshevik Revolution, where military disintegration heralded the fall of a regime. As the conditions intensify, soldiers grapple not only with enemy fire but with the brutal reality posed by their own commanders. A shadowy hierarchy of abuse has taken root, where seasoned soldiers prey on newcomers, creating a toxic atmosphere that amplifies the chaos. In a bid to escape the day-to-day horrors, soldiers grapple with the dire realities of supply shortages. Imagine being on the front lines, with dwindling food supplies and ration ammunition. The stench of neglect lingers in the air, creating a palpable sense of desperation. What compels these soldiers to risk everything? Well, a glimmer of hope emerges from Ukraine's I Want to Live initiative, which offers Russian soldiers a way to surrender safely with assurances of humane treatment. This project underscores a pivotal shift. Soldiers have the option to choose life over an end guaranteed by reckless command. Previously, desertion was more frequent among newly mobilized troops, but now, seasoned combatants are also fleeing, showing the widespread erosion of trust in military leadership. In a chilling attempt to maintain control, the Kremlin employs a ruthless strategy, resorting to extrajudicial executions and terror tactics targeting soldiers who dissent. Internal documents reveal a harrowing trend, with commanders executing troops under the guise of disobedience to orders. This method, feared and loathed by troops, reveals how dire the situation has become, a modern-day chilling echo of Stalin's past brutality. But here's the twist, the execution orders do not instill obedience or fear, they bolster desertion rates instead. Soldiers now face a grim calculation, they can march to certain death in a meat grinder of warfare or risk disobeying orders to seek a chance at survival. A stark fear of the unknown grips them, with rapidly dwindling morale transforming them into potential threats to a regime already teetering on the brink of chaos. In this twisted game of survival, what happens to a soldier caught between despair, disillusionment, and the possibility of life beyond the battlefield? The potential for widespread chaos looms on the horizon. Threatening the very fabric of society at home as trust in the military erodes to nothing. What unfolds from here could redefine the course of history, as the regime's desperate measures only accelerate the very collapse they seek to prevent. As tensions rise and soldiers feel cornered, a cycle of chaos ensues. Brutal acts of control only deepen the schism within the ranks. Instead of instilling discipline, these extreme measures fuel discontent. What will happen when a soldier, trapped between execution and mass slaughter, chooses survival over surrender? The heart of Putin's military might is beginning to crumble. Desertion now stands as a more rational response than certain death in this dire scenario. The regime finds itself ensnared in a self-created trap. The executions aimed at enforcing obedience are instead igniting rebellion, accelerating the erosion of control. This crisis extends far beyond mere tactical failures on battlefields, it marks the disintegration of the very backbone upon which Putin's authority relies, the military. When soldiers are shot for refusing suicide missions, the chain of command becomes an instrument of dread, not order. Discipline has unraveled, with commands rooted not in respect nor hierarchy, but in the fleeting terror provoked by the barrel of a gun. Alarmingly, this fear is proving inadequate as a means of deterrence. For years, Putin's unspoken contract with the army mirrored that with everyday citizens: fight for your nation, and in return, receive honor, salary, and basic necessities to endure. Yet, as desertions rise alongside summary executions, that pact is shattered beyond repair. The regime has not only failed to safeguard civilians like those in Belgorod, but also its own warriors on the front lines. Today, soldiers are offered not valor but death marches, not compensation but starvation. And instead of equipment, the specter of execution looms for any signs of disobedience. Analysts view this as a significant collapse. Despite the harsh penalties and looming threats, desertions continue to climb. Morale has plummeted, soldiers have severed bonds with their leaders, and now the Russian army faces destruction, not from an external force like Ukraine, but from its own internal decay. The question begs, what happens when an army turns on its own? What chaos might erupt when the lines of loyalty are frayed? As the reality of their plight sinks in, where will the path of survival lead these soldiers trapped in a relentless cycle of despair? Stay tuned to discover the harrowing choices and desperate decisions faced by those who once marched under the banner of a mighty regime, now rifled with fear and uncertainty. As the drums of war beat on, what will be the shocking outcome for a beleaguered army fighting against time and fate? What if an army, once deemed mighty and unshakable, has become a mere shadow of itself, crumbling from within? On October 18, 2025, alarming statistics emerged from the Ukrainian intelligence agency and the OSINT project Frontelligence Insight, revealing the staggering collapse of Putin's military forces. Over 9 months, an astonishing 25,000 soldiers deserted the Russian Central Military District alone. This startling figure isn't just a statistic, it's a keyhole into a larger disintegration, a panic that's weaving through the soldiers' ranks. Imagine a fortress disintegrating from the inside, each stone falling away as soldiers, once proud defenders, abandoned their posts. This wasn't merely an event, it marked the dismantling of the very fabric of the Russian military, its backbone shattered, exposing vulnerabilities. Independent analyses confirmed this is no isolated incident, it's a systemic crisis. Projections suggest that by year-end, up to 70,000 soldiers, or roughly 10% of the total force, could be poised to flee. What does this remind us of? History bears a striking resemblance. In 1917, during World War I, desertion rates spiraled to 14% in Tsarist Russia, igniting a chain reaction that led to the Bolshevik Revolution. Today's landscape echoes those alarming times, where disheartened soldiers retreat not just from enemy fire but from a commanding structure they no longer respect. Why are these men risking everything to escape? We must peel away the layers to understand their plight. Far from cowardice, it's a primal survival instinct in the face of abysmal conditions. The reports highlight unbearable living situations, exacerbated by a brutal unofficial hierarchy where veteran soldiers prey on newcomers. As fear and desperation intertwine, many soldiers now dread their comrades more than the enemy. On the front lines, an acute scarcity of supplies adds to the chaos. This isn't merely logistical mismanagement, it reflects a catastrophic abandonment of the troops. Fresh food is an elusive dream, and vital medical supplies are scarce. Rationing ammunition turns desperation into betrayal as soldiers consider abandoning their positions due to sheer starvation and lack of support. Why has the war machine lost its capacity to support its troops? This collapse traces back to a failing war economy, hindered by Western sanctions that severed access to essential materials. Struggling factories can't produce shells or vehicles at the necessary scale, and the logistics are paralyzed by targeted attacks on railways and refineries. As morale plummets, commanders begin resorting to meet assaults, suicide missions labeled as tactical engagements, where poorly trained groups are sent to charge into enemy lines with little hope of return. Daring to question these orders, many soldiers refuse to go on missions that feel more like execution orders than acts of war. However, there's a glimmer of hope emerging from the chaos. The Ukrainian campaign, I Want to Live, is enticing these soldiers with the promise of safe surrender, presenting an alternative for those trapped in a waking nightmare. Infiltration of radio frequencies and targeted messaging resonate among the desperate, a lifeline amidst the tide of hopelessness. As the landscape shifts, the narrative of desertion has transformed. Now, seasoned soldiers, not just new recruits, are fleeing the front lines, signaling a profound erosion of confidence in command. This mass exodus resonates with a terrifying potential for chaos, hinting at a pivotal moment in this tragic saga. The old hierarchy is crumbling, survival now dances at the fingertips of those brave enough to reach for it. With each detail unveiled, what becomes clear is the broader picture: a once mighty army brought low, the most fundamental instincts of survival prevailing over blind allegiance. Will despair catalyze a worse fate, or is this the turning tide that will reshape a nation? The answers linger in the air, heavy with uncertainty and fraught with the echoes of history.